Your Honor, the claimant has no legal standing. She is not a lawyer. She has no degree, no bar number, no credentials of any kind. Then would someone like to explain to me why she's the only person in this room who has read the full file? The woman at the respondent's table did not look up when they said it. She was 51 years old, wearing a gray cardigan that had seen better winters, and she had a pair of reading glasses pushed up into hair that had gone mostly silver. She did not look like someone who was about to dismantle a case that 3 professionals had already declared airtight. Her name was Vivienne Tran. She had spent 22 years cleaning other people's offices, and she was the only reason her son-in-law was still breathing. To understand how she got there, you have to go back 18 months. The house on Dunbar Street in East Vancouver sat on a narrow lot between a dry cleaner and a Vietnamese grocery. The paint on the eaves had started to peel the year before, and the front steps creaked on the third one. But inside there was always something on the stove. Vivienne had cooked dinner for her daughter's family every Sunday for 11 years. Roast chicken in winter, cold noodles in summer, and on special occasions her mother's recipe for core pork that took 3 hours, and a particular kind of patience most people had stopped practicing. Her daughter, Lynn, had married André Bouchard 7 years earlier in a small ceremony at a community hall in Burnaby. Lynn was a dental hygienist. Dre drove a commercial truck for a building supply company, hauling drywall and lumber across the lower mainland 5 days a week. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders, with a laugh that started in his chest and took a moment to arrive at his face. He called Vivienne Maman from the first Christmas he spent with them, which she never once said she liked, and which she never once asked him to stop. Their son, Theo, was 3 years old. He had his father's laugh and his mother's habit of going quiet when something was wrong. On a Thursday morning in October, a transport truck registered to Cascade Freight Solutions reversed through the wall of a storage unit facility on Marine Drive. No one was hurt. The damage was assessed at $240,000. The driver, according to the incident report filed 90 minutes later, was André Bouchard. André was at work that day. He had signed in at the depot at 6:45 in the morning and was logged on the company dispatch system through every hour of the shift. But the insurance investigator assigned to Cascade's policy was a man named Raymond Langford, and Langford had spent 15 years deciding what the truth looked like before he looked for it. The truck was registered to Cascade. The driver code linked to André's employee number. The GPS unit in the cab had transmitted a single corrupted file that morning, later described as a technical anomaly, and Langford had looked at that anomaly and decided it meant nothing. He had looked at everything else and decided it meant André. Cascade's legal team sent a letter to the Bouchard household on a Monday. Lynn read it standing at the kitchen counter. André was at work. She called him, and he pulled over on the Barnett Highway, and she read it to him through the phone, and he sat in the cab of his truck for 11 minutes before he drove back to the depot to tell his supervisor. The company suspended him pending investigation. Vivienne found out that Sunday when she arrived with the chicken. Lynn had been crying. Theo was asleep in the back room. André was sitting at the kitchen table with his hands folded in front of him the way men sit when they don't know what to do with their hands. The letter said Cascade was pursuing recovery of the full damage amount plus legal costs. It named André personally, $240,000. For the Bouchard family, it might as well have been $240 million. They hired a lawyer, a young man named Fitzgerald from a firm on Granville that a friend had recommended. He was thorough in the way of someone who has been trained to be thorough rather than someone who is curious. He reviewed the dispatch logs, the GPS file, the incident report. He told them the corrupted GPS data was the problem. Without clean location data for that window, he said it was their word against the investigators' interpretation. We can fight it, he told them. But I want to be honest with you. The burden of proof in civil recovery is not the same as criminal court. The weight sits differently here. What he meant was that Cascade had more money than the Bouchards, and money had a way of outlasting patience. Andre's second lawyer was a woman who specialized in employment disputes. She lasted 4 months before advising them to settle. The number being offered was still 6 figures. "We didn't do anything wrong," Andre told her. She opened her hands the way people do when they are about to say something they don't want to say. "I believe you. But believing isn't the same as proving." By the time winter came again, the legal fees had taken most of their savings. Lynn had picked up extra shifts. Andre had found cash work on weekends doing small renovation jobs, coming home Sundays with plaster in his hair, just in time to eat Vivienne's dinner and pretend everything was fine. He was very good at pretending. The smile was the part Vivienne could not stand. Theo had started calling the couch his father's bed because Andre had moved there so Lynn could sleep. Vivienne started staying later after Sunday dinners. She told them it was to help with Theo. That was true. It was not the whole truth. She had worked night cleaning shifts for 22 years. Office buildings, mostly. She knew which firms had the best coffee, which accountants left their windows open in January, which lawyers stayed past midnight, and which ones billed hours they never worked. She had cleaned around sleeping partners and crying articling students. She had emptied waste baskets full of drafts and printouts without reading them, because that was the job. But she had listened. For 22 years, she had listened to the way offices sounded when people thought no one was paying attention. The question she asked Lynn on a Sunday night in January was a small one. What exactly does the GPS file say happened? Lynn pulled out the folder they had stopped being able to look at. The file, as described in Langford's report, showed a corrupted data sequence beginning at 8:47 in the morning and terminating at 11:22. The sequence contained no usable location pings. Langford had noted the anomaly and stated it was consistent with manual interference, which was his way of saying someone had tampered with the device. Vivienne asked to borrow the folder. Lynn watched her mother put it in her canvas bag under the foil tray of leftover chicken. "Don't get your hopes up," Lynn said quietly. Vivienne zipped the bag closed. "I'm just going to look at it." She read it at her kitchen table until 2 in the morning. She did not understand all of it. She wrote down every word she did not understand on the back of an envelope. The next day, she went to the Vancouver Public Library on Robson and asked the librarian where they kept the technical reference materials. What she was looking for, the librarian asked. "Fleet telematics," Vivienne said. "GPS data systems. Error logging." The librarian was quiet for a moment. Then she walked Vivienne to a section most people walked past. It took 3 weeks. The language fought her the way any language fights a person who was not raised in it. But Vivienne had spent her life learning the rooms she was allowed to be in and the rooms she wasn't. She learned the difference between a corrupted file and a suppressed file. She learned that modern GPS units did not simply stop recording. They recorded the fact of the failure. There was a difference, she came to understand, between a device that had lost signal and a device that had been powered off. A device that lost signal left a gap. A device that had been powered off left a shutdown log. She wrote that sentence down and looked at it for a long time. She went back to the incident report. Langford had described the corrupted sequence. He had attached the raw file as Appendix C. He had not mentioned the shutdown log. She read Appendix C 4 times. There it was, 11 characters in a standard event notation, time-stamped at 8:46 in the morning, 1 minute before the sequence Langford said was corrupted. PW off, manual power termination. Someone had turned the unit off. Not Andre. Andre had been logged into the dispatch system from 6:45 that morning, receiving route assignments, acknowledging stops, and the dispatch system ran through the same cab unit as the GPS. If Andre had powered off the GPS, the dispatch link would have dropped simultaneously. It had not dropped. It had stayed active through every minute of that morning, which meant the GPS had been powered off by someone who had access to the unit but was not transmitting on the dispatch channel, which meant the unit had been accessed outside of Andre's operating hours. Vivienne sat in the library with that fact for a long time. A man came and sat 2 tables away and opened a newspaper, and she watched him read without seeing him. Then she moved fast. She found the maintenance records in the original file disclosure, pages she had skimmed because they looked like technical inventory. Every serviced vehicle in Cascade's fleet had its cab unit logged by the maintenance team. Andre's truck, Unit 441, had been brought in for a standard service inspection 4 days before the incident. The cab unit had been accessed by a maintenance technician for a firmware check. The technician's code was in the log. She wrote it down. She did not know what to do with it yet. She knew it mattered. She walked home in the February cold with the envelope against her chest, and the kind of tiredness that comes not from working but from seeing something clearly that everyone around you has refused to look at. She had not told Andre or Ling any of this. She had decided they would not hear a word until there was something real to hold. Her name was Margaret Osei. She was 68 years old, and she had retired after 35 years as a forensic document examiner for the RCMP. She came to the library on Tuesday mornings for the periodicals, and because her apartment was too quiet since her husband had passed. She had noticed Vivienne 3 weeks earlier. The canvas bag, the careful handwriting, the way the woman turned pages, the way people turn pages when they are looking for something specific and are afraid to miss it. Margaret had learned over 35 years that there were 2 kinds of people who sat alone with technical documents: people who were lost in them, and people who were hunting inside them. She sat down across from Vivienne on a Tuesday in late February and said, "You have the look of someone who found something they don't know how to use." Vivienne looked up. She studied the older woman for a moment. "I think someone falsified an insurance claim," Vivienne said. "And I think I know how to prove it, but I don't know where to take the proof." Margaret put down her magazine. "Tell me what you found." Vivienne laid out the envelope, the shutdown log, the dispatch records, the maintenance technician's code, the timeline. Margaret read everything without saying a word. When she finished, she took off her glasses and cleaned them the way people do when they need a moment to think. 35 years, she said quietly. And the clearest case I have seen in the last 5 years is sitting in a library envelope. She explained what Vivienne had found in the language Vivienne needed. The PWR-off entry was not a data anomaly. It was a forensic event. It meant a physical action had been taken on that unit at a specific time. The technician code in the maintenance log could be cross-referenced against Cascade's own internal records. If that technician's access card or vehicle log placed them near Unit 441 on the morning of the incident, the entire case against Andre collapsed. "This needs to go to a lawyer," Margaret said. "Not a settlement lawyer. A litigation lawyer who knows insurance fraud." "I've had 2 lawyers," Vivienne said. They didn't look at Appendix C. Margaret was already writing a name on a page from her notebook. "This one will." Her name was Constance Adjei. She was 44 years old, and she had spent 12 years doing exactly the kind of work Margaret was describing, and when Vivienne sat across from her in a small office on West Hastings on a Thursday afternoon and laid the envelope on the desk, Constance read it without interrupting once. Then she looked up. "Where did you find this?" "Appendix C of the original disclosure," Vivienne said. "The investigator's report." Constance was quiet. She picked up the page again. She set it down. 2 lawyers reviewed this file, and neither one flagged the shutdown log. Vivienne said nothing. "Who are you?" Constance asked. "What do you do?" "I clean offices," Vivienne said. Constance looked at her for a moment, then she turned to her computer. "Let's request the maintenance technician's access records under the discovery process," she said. "If his card placed him near that truck that morning, we are not looking at a disputed claim. We are looking at fraud." The records came back 6 weeks later. Vivienne checked the mailbox every day before she checked anything else. She had not told Ling about Constance. She had not told Andre. She packed Theo's lunch kit on Wednesday mornings when she watched him, and she went to the library, and she waited. The records showed that the maintenance technician, a man employed by a third-party contractor Cascade had used for 2 years, had clocked in at the Cascade depot at 8:15 on the morning of the incident. His access card had been swiped at Vehicle Bay 4 at 8:39. Unit 441 was assigned to Bay 4. He had been at that truck 7 minutes before the GPS powered off. Constance filed a motion for an urgent evidentiary hearing on a Friday morning. By Monday, Cascade's insurer had retained a second counsel. By Wednesday, Cascade itself had retained a third. The hearing was scheduled for March in a small hearing room at the BC Supreme Court on Smythe Street. Word moved quietly through the Bouchard household. Ling cried in the bathroom with the tap running so Theo wouldn't hear. Andre sat at the kitchen table and looked at his hands. He had not been told about the shutdown log. He had not been told about the maintenance records. He had not been told about any of it until the night before the hearing, when Vivienne came for dinner and Constance was with her. Andre looked at his mother-in-law across the kitchen table for a long time. "You did all of this," he said. "I just read what was there," she said. He looked at the ceiling. He had done that more in the last 18 months than in his whole life before. "You should have told me. You would have told me not to get involved." A long silence. "Yeah," he said, "I would have." Vivienne put her fork down and looked at him directly. "I have been cleaning offices for 22 years. I have emptied wastebaskets full of things people were certain no one would ever read." She paused. People forget that someone sees the rooms after everyone leaves. The hearing room held fewer people than a courtroom, but more than anyone had expected. People from Andre's depot came in their work vests. Constance had told them not to, but they had come anyway and changed in the parking garage. Lynn sat in the second row with Theo on her lap. Theo was wearing his good shirt and did not fully understand what was happening, which may have been why he was the calmest person in the room. Cascade's lead counsel was a man named Sutherland. He was gray-suited and precise in the way of someone who had learned early that precision was its own kind of pressure. He had won 41 insurance hearings in 12 years. He looked at Constance Adjay's table, noted Vivienne sitting beside her, and his expression did not change, which was its own kind of dismissal. "Your Honor, the claimant has no legal standing. She is not a lawyer. She has no degree, no bar number, no credentials of any kind." Justice Leclair looked over her glasses at the respondent's table. "Then would someone like to explain to me why she's the only person in this room who has read the full file?" Vivienne did not smile. She was looking at Appendix C. Constance rose and laid out the case methodically. The shutdown log, the dispatch records that disproved tampering by the driver, the maintenance technician's access card timestamp. She submitted the forensic analysis that Margaret had prepared as a supporting affidavit. She gave the court the 6-minute window between the technician's bay swipe and the GPS shutdown. She gave them the fact that the truck had been assigned to a different driver the following week, and that driver had reported a GPS irregularity that had been logged and quietly resolved. Sutherland objected 11 times. Justice Leclair sustained 2 of them. He argued the shutdown log was ambiguous. Constance submitted the manufacturer's documentation specifying the exact notation format. He argued the technician's presence in the bay was routine. Constance asked him to explain why a routine firmware check required no record of completion, when every other service in the same log had a completion notation except this one. He argued that without the technician himself testifying, the access records were circumstantial. Justice Leclair set down her pen. "Mr. Sutherland," she said, "if I accept your standard, we would never be able to establish anything from a record that a party to the dispute had reason to avoid creating." Sutherland adjusted his tie. He had the look of a man hearing his own words come back to him in a smaller room than he expected. He had nothing further. The ruling came at the end of the same session. Justice Leclair did not recess. She read from the bench. The evidence before this court establishes, to the required standard, that the GPS data corruption in Unit 441 on the date in question resulted from a manual power termination event performed by a third party with depot access, and not from any action taken by the vehicle's assigned operator. The claim against André Bouchard is dismissed. The court finds that the investigative process relied upon by Cascade Freight Solutions and its insurer materially failed to account for evidence contained within their own disclosure documents. She looked up. The court will be referring this matter to the provincial insurance regulator for review of the original investigation's conduct. Costs are awarded to the respondent. The gavel came down once. André sat very still. Linge put her hand over her mouth. Theo looked up at his mother and then at his grandmother and said, in the clear, interested voice of a 4-year-old, "Is Papa okay now?" "Yes, baby," Vivienne said. "He's okay." André did not run to his mother-in-law. He crossed the room at the pace of a man who is not sure his legs will hold, and when he reached her, he put his arms around her, this woman in the gray cardigan who had cleaned office buildings for 22 years and found what 3 lawyers and a licensed investigator had left in plain sight. He didn't say anything for a while. Neither did she. When they were outside, on the steps of the courthouse in the March cold, André stopped and looked at the sky the way people do when they have been inside too long. Lynn held his arm. Theo ran in a small circle on the sidewalk for no particular reason. Vivienne stood 1 step below him and let the sun do what it wanted. Raymond Langford's investigation was formally reviewed by the regulator 4 months later. His methodology was found to contain, in the language of the report, a material failure to pursue contradictory evidence. His license was suspended pending a full audit of his case files. 3 other claims he had handled were flagged for secondary review. The maintenance technician resigned from the contractor firm the week after the hearing. No charges were ever publicly announced, but the contractor lost its Cascade contract by April. André went back to work in May. His depot manager met him in the parking lot his first morning back. They stood together for a moment without saying anything. Then the manager handed him the keys to Unit 441. "Fix the GPS," he said. "Thought you should know." André drove his route that day and the day after. Lynn slept in the bedroom. Theo moved his books back to the living room shelf where they had always been before everything shifted. Vivienne still brings dinner on Sundays. The steps still creak on the 3rd one. The chicken still takes the same amount of time as it always has. On the corner of the kitchen bookshelf, between a French-English dictionary and a manual for a dishwasher they no longer own, there is a canvas bag with an envelope in it. Vivienne has never taken it out. She doesn't need to. She already knows what's in it. So I will leave you with what I keep returning to every time I think about that hearing room on Smythe Street. A licensed investigator reviewed that file. 2 trained lawyers reviewed that file. And the evidence that cleared an innocent man had been sitting in Appendix C the whole time, visible to anyone who read to page 31. A woman who cleaned offices for 22 years read to page 31. I wonder sometimes what else is sitting in a folder that no one has opened yet. What other Appendix C exists in someone's kitchen table right now, waiting for someone patient and stubborn enough to find it? Here is my question for you. If you had been in that hearing room and you had seen a woman in a gray cardigan sit down beside a lawyer as her only credential, would you have leaned forward or would you have looked away? Be honest. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needed it today. There are more rooms like that one. There are more people like Vivienne. We just have to remember to look.